Okay. Hi everyone, good evening. So nice to have all of you here. Today we are in the interview series by Women Who Code. First, we will just introduce what is Women Who Code. Basically, it is a global community which mission is to inspire women to excel in the technology careers. So it does so by organizing events such as this one to help women be prepared for technical interviews. And then our vision is actually to improve the women representation in the industry. So we want to have women as engineers or board members or founders. Yeah, we want to have more women in the industry. We are actually in 134 countries. And then if you are interested to know more about Women Who Code, please head to womenwhocode.com/digital and you can already sign up for our upcoming events. Okay. Yeah, so for today, we are privileged to have our speaker here, Sonia. I'll let Sonia to introduce herself.
So hi everyone, my name is Sonia. I'm really happy to be with you today to do this session. And so I'm a full stack software engineer at Wise here in Singapore. And I've been working as an engineer for more than 5 years now. And I like to describe myself as a wannabe front-end engineer because I've been working as mostly as a back-end engineer since the beginning of my career, but slowly trying to move to doing more and more front-end. So now I'm like a real full stack engineer doing like half-half. Yeah, that's about me.
Cool, that's a very exciting job that you have. I will also introduce myself as your host today. My name is Maryana. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, I'm working in PayPal for 9 months. Altogether, I only have about 2.5 year experience. So it is the representation of the junior here. Yeah. So as we go along, please do ask your question in the chat group. We type your question and just send. Then I'll try to compile and sort them, and Sonia can answer that at the end of the session and the mock interview session. Okay, yeah. So with that, we will now begin by asking some background first from Sonia. Sonia, can you explain a little bit what is a tech round?
Sure. So I think like it's important like to define what we mean by tech round in our context, because it's not like an industry standard term, like coding interview or system design round. So in today's context, what we call tech round is a round that can be either like questions about your experience. So where like the interviewer can ask you about what you are doing in your current position or stuff that you did in the past, or maybe like where you would like pick a line on your resume and ask like clarifying questions like about tech. And then it could also be a succession of general software engineering questions that can be like super direct. So compared to a system design exercise where you would be asked like a broad problem and then you will design around it, like during what we call tech rounds today, you will get asked like very specific question and one after the other, usually like multiple ones. So yeah, that's the difference with the system design interview. And so usually it can also be coupled to a code or a system design exercise. You won't, I mean, depends on some companies, but you can have like one part that is what we call like tech round, and then another part where it's like more system design or coding. Yeah, so not all companies would have this kind of interview. While on the other hand, I know some companies might have like multiple, like we say, tech rounds. So if you are not sure, make sure to always like clarify with the recruiter what is expected from you during the interview. Yeah, so that's what are tech rounds that we're going to talk about today.
Yes, thank you, Sonia, for the definition of what tech round might be. And do you know what's the purpose of these tech round interviews?
Yeah, so during this interview, usually like the interviewer will try to understand your scope of work. Like the goal is like the interviewer want to know what you did and how you did it, and also check on your technical expertise to see if you match the job. Like this is like during a coding interview or a system design interview, sometimes you cannot like see uh, like in details, this kind of thing. So this is why we have tech rounds. It's also to assess your impact in your current organization. So stuff like how do you bring value, what makes you a good engineer, like do you have strong sense of ownership, or are you more like the kind of person that is able to fix like deep technical problem, or are you like more a project driver? Like all these kind of things, same, it's easier to see during a tech round. So of course, like all the stuff that I just listed, like you don't have to have it all. It depends on the job you're applying, but it's just like something that is easier to assess during this round. Another thing that is assessed during this round is like some soft skills. And yeah, because same during coding where like it's purely technical, like sometimes you cannot really assess like your communication style, whether you can work with the team and stuff like this. So same like during this round, since you'll talk a lot usually, either about your experience or about tech stuff, like your interviewer can assess your like communication style and might be looking for red flags. And that's also like a great uh, technique, a great interview type to evaluate your seniority, because same as, I mean, compared to coding or system design where like practice makes you better and stuff, during tech rounds, it's easier to see like, to check the difference between a junior and like a more senior person. While during coding, like a senior and a junior person can give you like the same code. Generally, during the tech rounds, since you're going to talk about your experience and you'll get asked multiple questions about like lots of different topics, then the interviewer can like put you kind of on a scale to evaluate your level. So yeah.
Cool. Now we will go to the first part, which is like you mentioned, is usually about the interviewee's past experience. Can you tell us some tips for this section?
Yes. So for this, my first tip would be like to be super prepared. Like as for any interview, you should be prepared. But like when you go in an interview to talk about your past experience, you might think you know enough about what you're doing, but I swear you'll be surprised. Especially with stress and stuff, like you can forget things. So my first advice would be to prepare your resume. Like make sure you clean up anything that would be outdated or that you wouldn't be like super comfortable to talk about. Like it's okay to keep like description or little summary about your past projects or experience, like stuff maybe that you did in university or like in the first year of full-time work. But like if there is like maybe mention to technologies or stuff that you don't use anymore, you don't really remember, like you don't have to put details, because then like it invites the not the recruiter, the interviewer to ask about this and pick on you. So yeah, make sure to basically just put stuff that you can talk about. And another thing is like you need to make sure that you can talk about your projects clearly to people that were not involved in your project. So make sure to practice with a friend and that they understand clearly what you're saying. And also maybe something that you can do, oops, a bit slow. You can prepare like this kind of table before you even submit your resume, where you will list like your projects, the challenges, and yeah, what didn't go well, the impact. So when like I need to stop saying recruiter, when an interviewer asks you about, oh, what did you do what did you do during this part of the job and stuff like this, like you're already prepared and you can answer like on the spot. You don't have to think. And this is something that is good to keep even throughout your career. Like every time you work on something like that is a bit impactful, like sizable in time, just like update your table, keep this in Google Drive, and you can always get back to it. So this will be my very first advice. Another thing is that during this kind of interview, like the interviewer will try to see what are your strengths. So you should absolutely like show your value and what you bring during uh, the project that you worked on in your organization. So make sure to highlight what was your contribution. Like we all know, like we worked as a team. So when you talk about like long project, you can put context about what the team did, but it's also important like to say like, what did you do personally? Did you work on, I don't know, design, driving the project, implementation of backend, front end, like be specific. This is a good thing. Another thing that is worth mentioning, I would say, is like we all make mistakes in our job. Like it would be surprising if you worked on a project that went like 100% well. So, and like people might refrain from telling about some stuff that went wrong. But I would say like, if you encountered problem during a project, like either technically or organizationally, it's still good to mention it. But especially if you had learning from them, because it shows that you grow as an engineer. So don't try to hide your mistakes. As long as you own it and you learn from it, is actually like a good thing to share with the interviewer. And it's a bit slow, I think. Sorry. Yes, sorry. Yeah, and the last thing, of course, like this is still an interview about tech, so and we're still software engineers, so you should not be shy to explain like tech details of your project, not just high level, and explain like, how did you use some tech to solve your problem. So maybe at first when you talk about your experience, you go high level, and then if there are stuff that are more interesting, you try to dig deeper into those details. Yeah, that's my advice is about the experience part of the interview.
Thank you, Sonia. How about the second part when you are asked about various tech questions? What are your tips?
So for this part of the interview, like I said earlier, is to check if you have like the minimum requirement for the job. So same as for every interview, you should be a bit prepared, and especially on technologies that you mention on your resume. And even more if the stack of the company that you're interviewing at is the same as the one that you use. So maybe before you can kind of like prepare some tech cheat sheet. I don't know how to say this, very hard word for me. But yeah, basically just prepare some notes on different like technologies and stuff that you use in your everyday job. Just like as a reminder. So because with the stress and all, like you might forget stuff. So try to keep like categorize like API, I don't know, Java or whatever, and keep notes on stuff that are like very common question. It can be helpful. And of course, like it's always good to keep your knowledge up to date. So and to know about industry standards. So for this, prior to an interview or even throughout your career, it's good to read about tech blogs, like especially like other like companies, tech blogs, like those big companies, Uber, Twitter, Facebook. They always like to share like how do they do stuff, and this will make you learn like some new stuff. Think about mentoring as well. So I don't know, maybe in your company you don't have this kind of things. In mine, we do this. So basically you can ask someone to mentor you, and like someone more senior. So you can
love script.
Sorry.
Someone more senior, so they can share tips, they can talk to you about like what they are working on, and then you will learn from them. And of course, you can always like take some courses, especially when you read stuff online on tech blogs or about the technology that you think is cool. Like you can always take some crash course to see like how it actually works, because it's good to read about it, but you need to have like a concrete application to make sure like you understand how like the tech works. Yes, and another thing is that this interview, when you get asked like those general tech questions, can be so like usually the interviewer will ask you lots of different questions on different topic, like very broad. And so yeah, it will be a different topic, and it can be very stressful, like because at some point you wouldn't know how to answer. But that's normal, and my advice would be to not panic. Like usually, like the recruiter will try to push more to see like what's kind of how far of your understanding or your knowledge you can go. But it's not like to trick you. It's not. I mean, I hope it's not like this. But like personally, I know I had an interview where I had like tons of this question, and at the end I felt very bad because at some point I was just like, I don't know, I don't know. Lots of questions I say I don't know, and I was sure like I bombed the interview, but like 100% sure. In the end, I passed to the other round. So really, like, don't freak out. It's just to see the extent of your knowledge, and like don't be shy also to say like I don't know. That's normal. Like we're not supposed to know everything. So it's better like to say I don't know than trying to kind of bullshit yourself away and try to remember stuff that you read quickly. Like just say I don't know, go to the next question, and you'll do better on the next question. And the last thing I wanted to share is like you should be able to give examples. So even if you get asked like a very direct question, I don't that it seems like natural for you to answer, always give like an example. It shows that you understand what you're talking about. And examples doesn't have to be from your job, like something that you applied yourself. You can always say, oh yeah, I read this on this tech blog, and I know they use this technology to do like this, and I think it's interesting and stuff like this. Like you can always show that you understand what are the application of the tech that you're talking about. So yeah, that'll be it for my advice on the tech count. Yeah.
Oh, it seems like I am far more ready to go for interview now. Now we can, talking is very easy, right? Now we can practice in the mock interview. For the first round, I actually will be like so-called the mock interviewer, and we will interview Sonia. And then for the second interview question, it will be the other way around. Yeah. So without further ado, let's.
Just to precise, first we will do like a mock interview about like talking about your past experience, and then we will do another one about like more like general tech questions. So we should see the two examples.
Yeah, that's right. Hi Sonia, thanks for your interest in our company and for taking the time to meet me. Can you please walk me through a project that you work on that you think is interesting or challenging?
Yes, sure, Maryana. So maybe I can talk to you about a feature that we built with my team that was to send money at a later date and a specific date, and also like if we wanted to send this money recurringly, like monthly, weekly, and all. So actually, it wasn't on my team scope to work on this, but we decided to take this because it was like one of the first requested feature from our customers. And even though usually it's not on my team scope, we decided it was important to tackle this problem. So just to explain like how historically like things work in our app, usually when a customer wants to send money, like everything happens immediately. So what we do is like we create a quote in our system, and based on this quote, then we will create a transfer. And so basically we have a quote, we have a transfer. But the problem that we have for our use case is that when the transfer is created and before like we process the payout and all, it triggers all sorts of action in our backend. And like we will have stuff like verification, liquidity handling, fund hedging, fraud checks, all this stuff. So in our use case of like sending money at a later date, we didn't want like those checks to be executed immediately. We only want this to be executed the day we send the transfer, not when the customer create the transfer. So we couldn't really modify, like I told you about the transfer object and domain, to kind of add just a date there, because yeah, it would be very complicated because we have this like 4 years in our system, and changing this will take maybe like more than a year. So that was the interesting part of the problem, is like how we could like design this so that it works for our use case and we don't have to create a transfer immediately. And also maybe like if we can extend this to future use cases, like, oh, now we want to send money based on date. Maybe I want to send money based on a specific rate. So that was what makes the project challenging, mostly the design. Yeah.
Interesting. Can you tell me more about the design of the this feature?
Sure. So since we couldn't like modify the existing domain entity, we decided to build kind of a new domain and a new microservice like from scratch. So instead of having transfer, we introduced a new entity called send order, which would like capture the intent of a transfer. So stuff like currencies, amount, and having this object. So basically when a customer would create a transfer to send at a later date, it would not create a transfer, it will send order. And yeah, we'll save this in database, and having this object will allow us to expose the information to the customer without having to actually create a transfer. So we have this kind of wrapper entity. And then associated to this send order, we'll have another entity that we call triggers. That is also something that we introduced. So in our use case for scheduled transfers, the triggers will hold like the date and the recurrence information. And yeah, so we built it this way, having like order separated from trigger so that we can extend to future use case. So like our order will be the transfer intent, while the trigger will be, yeah, what will trigger sending the money. So later we can have like a trigger based on rate and stuff like this. So it's roughly how our domain works. Then for the flow, like since the only synchronous operation that we needed was creating the send order, because it's done from the customer, from the UI, we decided to completely build the service as an event-based system. So we can easily like define behavior associated to event. So when I say event-based here, I don't mean also with external services, but even within the service. So how it works, basically, every time you have a creation or an update in our system, we would raise an event, and we would have like one or multiple asynchronous tasks that will be associated to this event. We have our own library to manage those tasks. And all of these tasks like can run in isolation, they are retriable, which helps our system to be like reliable. So yeah, in the end, how it works is like customer create a schedule transfer. So we send an API call to our backend where we create a send order with a date trigger, and this raise events. Based on this event, we will send an email notification. We will schedule a later task to be created, to be run at the date the customer chooses to create the transfer. So we will only create the transfer later in the time when we need to execute sending the money. And since like everything is asynchronous, like a lot of things can change from the moment like the customer created a send order and when we actually like send out the money. So like another like challenging part that we have is that handling those errors was not easy. Yeah.
Thank you, Sonia. So now we can go on retro as a group, right? What we think has done well in this Sonia's answer and what can be improved. Okay, I think I can start. So I think Sonia has shown a very good understanding of the design. So it just shows that there is a sense of ownership and it's not merely executing or coding. So it does show the seniority. And then I think another thing is not talking much or at all about the tech stack, because I think I heard that if we talk so much about the tech stack, right, it just the interviewer might doubt we can actually use their own tech stack and contribute in the job. So it's good that it's general so that the interviewer can follow. And then
just something I wanted to mention, sorry, Mariana, about this. Yeah, I think basically it depends on, like, when you start the interview, let's first, like, I think it's a good idea to not focus on tech, just like explain globally how it works. You can still use stuff like message queue, database and all. You don't have to like use specific names. And then anyway, if the interviewer wants to know more about it, like, it will ask you. And so it's like in system design interview, right? You will first like do like the global design, and then you will dive into like the specifics. So here the same, like usually when you try to describe your project, don't try to go too deep into the stack, because then you go into more and more and more detail and it might be hard to follow. So first like overview, and then you can, let's see what your interviewer asks, and you can follow up like this. Yeah.
Yeah, actually that's true. Wait for more detailed days asked by the interviewer. What Sonia could have done better? I think there was some company link, like specific term, like hedge fund and what fraud check, right? There maybe someone is not from the payment or transfer domain, right? May not understand well. Yeah, so I think if maybe can just limit the industry specific. And the next thing that I think is the like could have used the first person I contribute, I proposed, I suggested, or I implemented. Right, then it just highlight Sonia's contribution to the project. Yeah. So any addition, Sonia?
No, I think, yeah, that's a good feedback. Yeah, like I said earlier, like you should show like what you bring, what you bring to the project and all. And in my case, I didn't say anything. I was like, you don't know what I did personally. I described the project, but yeah. But then, okay, this is we're limited in time. Maybe in a real interview, then your interviewer will ask you, but don't hesitate to be proactive about those stuff. Yeah. And yeah, using company lingo, yeah, it's true. And that's why like it's important to train with a friend or something and prepare your little like table beforehand. So when you go to the interview, like you can explain in like simple terms to anyone. Yeah. So I think we can go to the next question now.
Okay, thank you. Now we are back to the role play. Sonia, you mentioned that the error handling for your project was difficult. How did you solve this problem?
So yeah, so let me first take an example to illustrate that. So like I said, like in the regular flow of when you create a transfer, you will choose a recipient and assign it to the transfer, and everything will go fine because the recipient is there. But in our case of sending money, maybe like in 1 month or 2 months, like you can assign a recipient to your transfer and then delete it later. So this is this kind of issue that we were like struggling with. So what we did is at first we decided for a MVP when we have like not lots of usage to basically when this happened, we don't handle this proactively. We just do it like when we execute sending the money, we don't have the recipient. We just fail the execution and send like an email to the customer to say, hey, your execution failed, but we don't give a specific reason. Because the problem is like in our system, lots of things can go wrong. And we don't have like a very good API to like check like the error code and know exactly what happens. Like it's a bit all over the place. So we couldn't like do this properly at first. So first we decided to handle it like generically, and in parallel to add monitoring and alerting in our code so that we can maybe identify like what are the common use cases. So how it works, like every time these kind of things were happening, we have like our errors were like reported to roll bar, and then we'll get Slack alerting, and then the person that will be on call should be responsible to investigate a bit more what happens, like maybe identify, oh, this error code does this error response and all. So yeah, this was quite manual, but and unfortunately, like most of my teammates didn't really take this seriously when doing on call. So it was like quite long before we could categorize this issue. So after a while, we identified them and we handled them directly in the code. But it was still not like a good experience because we would fail only when we would at the date when we needed to send the transfer. So like the customer expect his money to be sent, and then there is no money sent. So it's not a good experience. So to the second like part of how to improve this is, so it took a bit more time to do this. So that's why we did the first part first. So I suggested that we could have something like a new Kafka topic in our service, where we would be like the consumer, and other services would be the producer. And basically, the idea was that other people know more about what happens in their domain than us, so they can tell us when there is something happening that requires to cancel the send order. So yeah, this is what we did. So I did the Kafka topic. We consume message from all producer, and then we would cancel in advance the transfer, so it doesn't wait until the last moment to fail. So yeah, that's basically how we handled those issues.
Why did you choose to do this with the asynchronous way instead of a REST API call?
Yeah, because we didn't need this to happen synchronously, because so first it wasn't part of a UI flow. It was all like in the system in the backend, and also so we didn't want to give the other services the responsibility of having to handle like errors if like our API was failing, because it's not their responsibility to cancel the transfer, it's ours. It's like their role is just to report, okay, this is this is something that say like, hey, you need to cancel the send order, and they don't have to care about whether this is done or not for their own like use case. This is something that we as the domain owner and stuff should handle. So I think by using message queue, then the producer can just report that, yeah, transfer need to be canceled, and not care about the processing, because we will take care of it. So that's why we didn't do REST API, and we didn't need to send a confirmation as well. So yeah, that was the reason.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. Okay, so now we will go back to the retro as a group. I can think of some of the what Sonia has done better. I think the example is very concrete about design decision and implementation. Yeah, and then also shows that Sonia can work across multiple teams and work well. And some of the architectural thoughts has been definitely put into the project by Sonia. And then it shows multiple possible approaches that can be taken. Yeah. And what's the final approach that is superior. I think what Sonia could have done better, for example, there was a rollback, right?
Roll bar.
Roll bar.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what it is. So if there is a term that the interviewer not sure, probably can just give a one-liner. And then the next one that I'm thinking of, I think like there was a mention, right, that during the call, during on-call roster, some developer don't really take seriously, such that it takes a while for the issue to be categorized. So this one is like, maybe we can refrain from mentioning a blame about others, because the interviewer may think that we are perpetually blaming others, although it's not us. Yeah. So that's what I think. Sonia, do you have addition?
Yeah, for the last point, I would say that so this is a good example of things that, like I said earlier, like you make mistakes and you learn from them. Like in this case, I was saying, like, oh, my teammates, they don't want to call properly. Well, I should have said that, oh, like the process we had in place was tedious and too manual and time consuming. And so that's why we moved to another way to automate the process. So like, yeah, it will reflect much better to say this than blaming others, of course. So yeah, never do this. Make sure like you learn, instead like identify the problem and like give the solution to the problem. Yeah, that would be my.
Thank you, Sonia. That's a very powerful advice. So now we will go back to the role play. Right? Again, I'm the interviewee. Sonia, in your resume, you mentioned that you improved the load time for the scheduled transfer management page. Can you share how you did this?
Sure. So the problem that we had is like how the page was implemented. So since we didn't have like too much time before we wanted to release, we kind of took some shortcuts. And one of the shortcuts is that we didn't really care about like optimization at first, but it worked. But at some point, like, yeah, we just wanted like to make it better since we had time to dedicate to this. So how it worked at first, like the bad way it would used to work is like we would show like a loader on the page. While we show the loader, we do like one API call to retrieve like all the transfers. And then for each of those transfers, we will retrieve the recipients. So like if we retrieve like 50 transfer, then we'll do 50 API calls to get the recipients. So I think you see like what the problem is here. And only when we get the recipients, we show the information. So yeah, and another thing that we noticed is that when for a same like customer, we would have only like maybe 3 to 5 recipients. Like all the transfer will go to 3 to 5 recipients. So it's very rare where you will have like, if you have 50 transfer, you have 50 recipients that are different. So what we did instead of calling like the recipient API like that many times, we just like updated the code to register recipient IDs that we get from the transfers. And then we will like just retrieve them in parallel instead of sequentially. Yeah, so basically if we have like now 20 transfer and only 3 to 5 recipients, we will just do like 3 to 5 call to get the recipient instead of 20 previously. So yeah, it was a very small change, like, but yeah, like when I talk about it, I feel like it's not too much like improvement, but in the end, like, I mean, technically it's not too much improvement, but when in the end, like, it still had a great impact for the customer. So I think it was still worth like doing it. Yeah.
Why didn't you introduce caching?
Oh, it's also something that we considered actually, but we thought like it wasn't so worth it for our use case, like considering the load was not like super high on our page and like the current experience was still okay. So, but instead, like what we consider to do next, if we if we have the capacity to tackle this, and if it ever becomes a problem for our customers, is that we would like to introduce pagination, because like I told you now, we retrieve all transfer that are pending, and yeah, so far like it's not a big issue because a customer won't have that many transfers. But if like our feature become more and more popular, which we hope, like maybe retrieving all the transfer at once will be like slow, and also like the page experience will be bad. Like you will just have an infinite scroll, which is not like ideal. So yeah, maybe the next step instead of caching would be to have pagination, like retrieve 20 by 20. I think it will be our approach there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. Okay. So now we will retro as a group what happened. I think the part that Sonia has done very well is to show the desire to improve by giving the next step or alternative solution for the for the
with the
for the
pagination.
yeah, with the pagination and then what she could have done better, she could be more confident because I think she mentioned that it's probably very small change, right? By uniquifying the ID before fetching them. Yeah, so I think that we cannot be underestimating the work that we have done because the like the API design is I think is quite a big things. And I mean a good design, right, is always very valuable to the project. So there is no such thing as the small change being like
Yeah, and I would say also, sorry, especially like anything that has an impact to like the end user, like you shouldn't underestimate. As long like it impacted the experience and make stuff better for your product, like yeah, no need to underestimate what you did. Even if it's something small, it's still valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so now over to you, Sonia.
So yeah, now we'll move to like a second mock interview where so we just did like the experience part of the interview. So now we'll do more like about direct tech question, just to show you like some example of question that can be asked. And I will be the interviewer and Maryana is going to be the interviewee. So, okay, let's jump into it. You ready, Maryana?
Okay.
So, hey, Maryana, since like you have experience with APIs as well as message queue, I was wondering like, when would you decide to use like an API call over a message queue and the opposite? Yeah.
I think in general, we can use the messaging or asynchronous if the task is non-blocking. So for example, if I have two service, create order service and it's create order service, calling payment service. So if let's say there is a request incoming to the create order, I can actually, if it's all right for the product requirement, I can actually do it asynchronously by publishing a message to the payment service. So in that case, I don't need to wait for the payment service to respond, and I'm getting the response before the request ends. I can just return the response without waiting. But this one, it may not be suitable depending on the business use case. For example, if the product requires us to always have payment for every order, then this may not be doable to have asynchronously. And even if we choose to do by messaging, which is asynchronous, there might be a more complicated error handling. For example, the payment service, if there is indeed a failed payment, it can actually like, for example, publish a message to a daemon to actually amend the order entity, etc. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for your answer, Maryana. Now move on to the next question. I've seen you have experience with databases. So just a quick question, like, do you know what a database index is?
Oh, DB index is normally created if we want to speed up a DB query. So there are two types of index. First is the clustered index, where the physical data is actually arranged as per the order of the index. So this will be usually like the primary key of the table. And we also have the non-clustered index, where the index ordering may not be the same with the physical ordering in the DB. So usually we do this for example, in join table, we want to index some of the column that is the foreign key that is joining the table. So we use this non-clustered index. So I heard that for the non-clustered index, right? For the clustered index, we usually don't do it for foreign key or not, because it's actually more heavy to have a clustered index. That's why it's only mainly for the unique column with unique values, or just the primary key only. Yeah.
Okay, understood. And maybe you can tell me then, since yeah, you're very familiar with indexes, why then we shouldn't like use indexes for everything? Why don't we add indexes on every column then?
Yeah, I think there is some performance fee. Let's say, for example, we need to insert, modify, or delete, or merge. I think it will be heavy to index everything, because, for example, for the clustered index, right, it means the server needs to move data or do page splitting. So the processing time of this insert, update, DB will be long if a lot of things are indexed. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also in your resume, like you mentioned that you use Teradata in one of the projects. Like, what's the advantage of using like Teradata to other RDMS?
Oh, actually, I'm not sure, because I only use Teradata to query. But Teradata use the SQL language. So since I'm familiar with SQL, I have no problem with Teradata.
Okay, okay, understood. Thank you. So maybe let's move to the next question. I think for the sake of time, we can go directly to this question. So yeah, maybe you can tell me like, how do you ensure like the quality of the code like that you're shipping like on an everyday basis?
Yes. So I write UT and FT for the code. So it is actually integrated with the CI/CD. So every time I build, my branch, there will be a code coverage. I always strive for 90% code coverage, and make sure that I write a good FT for it. And I also write a good documentation in the form of LLDs in the Confluence, and I make sure I comment my code. And we also did end-to-end testing. So it's not me, but it's the QE engineers. And then so we'll try to get a good end-to-end testing. I also make sure that I have monitoring and alert. So, and then the application performance metrics. So if, let's say, there is if the count of 400 or 500 error, usually it's 500 error, then the alert will be sent to me. Or let's say the SLA has dropped significantly, I will also get the email. Yeah, and also we do the gradual release. So first we do the MVP, and then if there is successful, then we can do another release for additional feature. And I also just make sure that my dependencies or library are the most updated one before the release. So that's how I do the code quality.
Huh, that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing.
Okay.
Maryana, do you think you want to do another question, or we can wrap up? How do you feel?
It's okay. I think we can do, right? Yeah, can help.
One more question.
We can ask the if let's say ladies, do you feel like you want to try a mock interview?
Does anyone wants to ask maybe wait, let's wrap up this one, see what are the bad points and the what went
Okay.
well and what.
Okay.
So about Maryana's answer, what went well is like so she gave example based on her own experience, like when she talked about the messaging queue and versus REST API. She was talking about like order, like payment, like something that she knew about and she used on her day-to-day basis. So it's good, though be careful to, I mean, assuming like the the interviewer knows that what she's talking about. Otherwise, I make sure to give like an example that the interviewer will always understand.
Yep.
And another, but something that wasn't too good, I think, is like sometimes like the answers seemed like too scripted and not backed by our own like experience. Like the very good example about this is like when I asked her what's a GB index, and she went into a very like lengthy kind of a description about clustered index, non-clustered index, and you should really be careful of showing like what you know, like to want to show that you know a lot, because like it can trigger the interviewer to ask more and dig more, and like you could be like digging your own grave. Like if you then you don't know something, and yeah, like the interviewer especially ask you about, you will feel like a bit trapped. So like just first answer like briefly, I would say. Like there was no question about cluster or non-cluster, so you don't have to give like details about this. And then like let the so like you can drive kind of the interview. If you go into details, because maybe it's something that you know like by heart, like you can still go, but be expected that the interviewer to follow up. So it's up to you if you want to go more into the technical like stuff that you know already. But I would advise to like to not do too much basically. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So that will be it for the retro of the tech question.
I think
So
there's
yeah, yeah, we have one more question if someone would like to try maybe in the audience. Would there be like some volunteers who wants to try to answer and see like we can debrief after? Otherwise, we can go straight to questions, I guess. No takers? Everybody is shy.
I would, okay, Idayat, I would love to try an experience working in a company. Oh, okay. Yeah, Idayat send regards. She said that she feels that she is not knowledgeable enough. Okay, anyway.
Okay.
So then we can
Just wrap up. Sorry?
Up to you. Then it's like, okay, okay, I think we have enough example, right? Yeah, you can just wrap up. Yeah. Oh, okay. So guys, ladies, so we are now in the Q&A session, right? There is one question by Eileen. Eileen say that how can we show that we can be tech agnostic? Oh, I think this might be related to the tip that says that if it's fine not to deep dive into the current tech stack, because it just shows that we can adapt to the company if we manage to do a good explanation about the concept of the tech instead of the deep digging into the tech stack. So I didn't ask how can be tech agnostic, and
So,
probably is still doing a good job. I mean, that's what I gather from the question. I think you can feel free also to unmute.
yeah, I mean, if I understand correctly, it's like how to be like explain still your project by being tech agnostic. Like when I say like you shouldn't be like too tech specific, you can still mention like some like tech stuff, but not like the how do I say? For example, you can say like, yeah, we use message queue, we use like SQL and stuff like this, but you don't have to give maybe the specific name like, oh yeah, we use RabbitMQ. If the like interviewer asks you, then you can answer. But like it shows that like you like basically you're not stuck with just one how do you say piece of technology, but are open to work with other as well. And because these things in the end like doesn't like really matter, except like if you are an expert, like maybe you're a Kafka expert and you really want to talk about Kafka, then you can also like mention it, especially in the interview. Like, because I know like in the interview that we drive sometimes in my company, if someone like would mention Kafka, we also use Kafka. We will ask stuff about like how do you do partitioning and stuff. So it's up to you actually. Like if you want to get asked like more questions in details about the specific tech, then feel free to mention it. But like you can show that you are also like kind of open-minded tech-wise by not like giving a specific name. And still like the important thing is like how your project works, the interaction between like services, modules, whatever. And in the end, like the technology itself, like the name of the like Kafka or RabbitMQ or MySQL versus Postgres, stuff like this, it's not like super like important. Yeah, except like if you want to talk about it, I guess. Yeah, I'm not sure if it answered the question.
Just now I didn't unmute. I saw Irene, is this answering or?
Yeah, I totally did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually have another question. Should I just ask right?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, perhaps for your recent interviews, what were the interview rounds like? For like the technical and perhaps the non-technical ones as well.
What do you mean? What were they like?
Yeah,
Like the interview that we took?
Mm.
You want to answer, Maryana? I can answer also later.
Yeah, I think for Sonia later, Sonia can add, right? But Sonia has shared the one that we discussed today is basically quite close to Wise interview. For the PayPal, right, is also surprisingly very close. Yeah. But what happened last time? These two rounds, right? It was in my first session of interview. Then after that, I have the second session of interview, which is the data structure algorithm. So I think the order may not be like consistent, right? But basically DSA and then what we do today. I was also asked my past experience and some of the technical, based on, actually it was based on my previous experience. Then the interviewer picked the question like what I did today as a mock interviewee. Yeah, so I went through the same thing in PayPal. And then the third one will be behavioral. So behavioral is the technical manager, but the interview series, the past interview series actually talk about the behavioral. So the behavioral is basically may not be technical, but we have to be prepared to ask technical question. So in the behavioral, I think I was asked like some situational question, like how you overcome when you make mistake, how you handle it or something like that in the behavioral question. Yeah. So the third round wasn't technical for me, but it could also be technical. Yeah. So that's for PayPal. So Sonia, you want to add?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if Aileen was asking about our companies or the interview that we took in maybe other places. But yeah, in my company at Wise, like I'm the interviewer for this kind of interview, like those tech rounds where we ask about experience, we ask questions, and we also have an exercise at the end, more like system design. So usually, like for us, it depends. Like if we see like we understand the experience of the interviewee, we will dig like more and more on the experience, and we have like less tech question, and otherwise maybe we can ask more tech question. But and we also have coding round and then like discussion with the managers as well. But I wanted to mention, like I've interviewed in a bank like a few years ago, where it was one coding round and I think 4 or 5 of those tech questions. Like, so every time 1 hour where you only get asked about like specific tech question, like, yeah, what's a REST API? What's this? So yeah, I think it's, so not every company does this, but that's why I say at the beginning, like make sure to clarify with the recruiter of like the content of the interview, and like, yeah, be prepared like a bit and make sure to have your resume only state stuff that you want to talk about. Yeah. That'll be my answer.
Okay, that's great.
All right, thank you.
Hope it answers.
Yeah, other questions? We still have time. I think we can give back maybe like how many minutes? Yeah, but we are happy to ask question. Oh, anyone wants to share, like the recent interviews, right? That unique experiences, or was the technical question similar or very difficult, much more difficult than what you see today, or other tips?
Yeah, was it like realistic? Was it something that you already see, like what the exercise that we did today, or not at all?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I think.
Everybody is too shy.
So just to share the questions which you mentioned from the backend perspective today are quite similar to what I had faced in a previous interview with Amazon. So that gives a lot of clarity as to how do we answer and how do we maintain what we have mentioned in the resume. And it can be sometimes that we have not faced that scenario, but we should have at least a logical answer to what the question is. So these type of answers definitely give us an idea as to how do we mention it to the interviewer going ahead.
Okay, that's good to know. I hope your interview went well.
No, I did not get selected. I'll try next time now.
Oh yeah, you can always try. It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Okay. Sonia, so we don't have much question. Okay, going one.
Okay, either mean I was super clear or super boring. I'm not sure. But yeah,
Oh,
I
you were
guess you can
definitely helpful. Definitely helpful. The audience may be quiet, but we have definitely got some answers which probably we have not worked on or implemented. But at least we get a
Okay.
perspective as to how to answer. So that definitely helps. Thank you for having this
Okay.
session.
Oh,
Thank you,
thank you. Thank
Prayaka.
you for the feedback. Yeah, because I'm also not an expert, so yeah, so it's nice to know that it can be helpful. Thank you. Yeah. So if no other feedback or a question, I guess we can just wrap up, right? So yeah, thanks everyone. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, sure. Thank you. I was just saying thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone that have joined today. It was my first time doing a kind of public presentation like this. So it was a difficult exercise for me. So happy to know that it was helpful. Yeah, hope yeah, it will help like get better in your next interview. And what else? Yeah, Women Who Code Singapore. You can always follow the events there. If you have any question, also you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't know if you need question or stuff like this. I'm easily foundable as Sonia Gabi. And yeah, feel free to ask me any question. I'll be happy.